Hop aboard a boat to explore the wetlands, a place fraught with unforeseen dangers. And you'll be amazed to see the wildlife firsthand. Don't forget to attend a fun and relaxing concert. Here, culture is vibrant and the joy of festivals abounds. All of this creates a unique and one-of-a-kind land, Louisiana. The content of this video is compiled from various sources. Please leave a comment below if you find any inaccuracies. The Choctaw called it Oquata, wide water. It's an estuary, brackish, tidal, connected to the Gulf of Mexico through a passage called the Rigolets. But at 630 square miles and stretching 40 miles from one shore to the other, the distinction barely matters when you're out on the water. The average depth is just 12 to 14 feet. Something that big, that flat, that shallow, it sits on the land like a lid. The Choctaw had been here for at least 3,500 years before that. The lake formed part of the original route into what would become New Orleans. The first boats entered the city through here, not the Mississippi. Racers, cruisers, kiteboarders. The shallowness makes it forgiving, and the size makes it feel like open ocean. Multiple bridges cross the lake, but cutting nearly straight down the middle is the Lake Pontchartrain Causeway, consisting of two parallel bridges, 23.87 miles long, holding the Guinness World Record for the longest continuous bridge over water on Earth. At one point on that drive, you can't see land in any direction. Just bridge and water, and whatever sky the day decided to bring. For a city that sits at or below sea level, the lake is everything. Neighbor, threat like this one, something close to beautiful. We worked really hard to make these videos, and of course, your support is a huge motivation. Donate $5 and we'll mention your name in our next video. Wow, that sounds awesome. Every city has a center. New Orleans laid its out in 1721, a flat, open square on the bank of the Mississippi. The square you see today be the iron fence, the formal gardens, the Parisian walkways. The 3 streets surrounding it were closed to cars in 1971, turning the whole area into a pedestrian zone. And since at least the 1920s, artists and musicians have made it their stage. "300 years on, the square still sits exactly where it was drawn, still facing the river, still the place where the city comes to gather." Before we head to the next spot, here's a fun question. What is the capital city of Louisiana? Comment your answer. Louisiana State University was founded in 1860, not here but near Pineville, Louisiana, as a military seminary. It moved to Baton Rouge. Then, in 1926, it got a new campus entirely. The Olmsted Brothers firm drew up the plan around 1921. Red-tiled roofs, stucco walls, Italian Renaissance all the way. Over 250 buildings. A 650-acre plateau above the Mississippi. The campus has 1,200 live oaks. They don't line the roads, they swallow them. Walking under those canopies, you understand why people fall in love with this place before they ever set foot in a classroom. In 2021, LSU enrolled over 28,000 undergraduates and more than 4,500 graduate students. Then there's Tiger Stadium. It opened in 1924 with seats for 12,000. Today, it holds 102,321. Seventh largest stadium on the planet. The locals call it Death Valley. In 2015, the university enrolled over 26,000 undergraduate and over 5,000 graduate students in 14 schools and colleges. Designated as a land grant, sea grant, and space grant institution, LSU is also noted for its extensive research facilities, operating some 800 sponsored research projects funded by agencies such as the National Institutes of Health, the National Science Foundation, the National Endowment for the Humanities, and the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. They call it the French Quarter. That's half the story. Bienville founded it in 1718. His engineer drew up the street grid in 1721, named after French royalty, Catholic saints, and the House of Bourbon. Two great fires in 1788 and 1794 burned through the district and erased most of what the French had built. The balconies, the courtyards, the ironwork, that's mostly Spanish sensibility, rebuilt on French bones. The Vieux Carré Commission has guarded its streetscape since 1936. The whole district was declared a National Historic Landmark in 1965. It sits 5 feet above sea level. When Katrina hit in 2005, the quarter stayed largely dry while much of the city drowned. Jazz was born nearby, in the clubs and street corners just beyond these blocks. The quarter became its stage, and still is. Gas lamps still burn here. The same narrow streets, the same iron galleries, the same riot of sound after dark. You're allowed to carry a drink outside. New Orleans is one of the few places in the country where that's legal. $10 million people come here every year. And on any given night, you'll find musicians playing like they have nowhere else to be. If you've been here before, comment number 6. If not, comment number 2. It's named after French royalty, not the whiskey. Both just share the same royal family. For most of its history, Bourbon was a modest residential street, home to Creoles and successive waves of immigrants, not yet the strip it would become. Nearly half its French Creole buildings burned in the Good Friday Fire of 1788, and new Spanish-style construction reshaped the street's face entirely. A French entrepreneur introduced the nightclub concept to Bourbon Street during Prohibition. Fine dining, tasteful entertainment, a tuxedoed MC, and a doorman. By 1945, Bourbon Street was big, raucous, and nationally famous. The 1940s and 1950s brought its golden age, burlesque clubs, exotic dancers, comedians, and live house bands. More than 50 acts on a single 5-block stretch on any given night. The Go Cup, the plastic tumbler that lets you carry a drink down the street, was invented here, according to Tulane historian Richard Campanella. The street runs 12 blocks. It draws millions of visitors every year. During Mardi Gras, it closes to cars entirely for 5 days. And what you see in these images is what that looks like. New Orleans. People say the name like an invitation. The city sits on a bend in the Mississippi. Water in every direction, culture from everywhere. In 2024, New Orleans welcomed 19 million visitors who spent $10.4 billion. Crossing that milestone for the first time since before the pandemic. Next to it, the Crescent City connection spans 2 steel cantilever bridges across the Mississippi, the twin spans that stitch the 2 sides of the city together. The red streetcar still runs on Canal Street every day, one of the oldest continuously operating streetcar lines in the United States. The French Market has been open since 1791. One of the oldest public markets in America. Jazz spills out everywhere. Street corners, the market, swamp boats gliding through the Bayou. Second line parades with brass bands and dancing. New Orleans doesn't just have festivals, it is a festival. Tourism generates nearly 40% of the city's operating budget. For New Orleans, that's not just an economic fact. That's how the city stays alive. Which region are you curious about? Let us know in the comments. We'll see you there in the next video. Most people call it the I-10 Bridge. Its real name is the Louisiana Memorial World War II Bridge. Construction began in 1948. It opened in 1952, built under Governor Earl K. Long as part of US Route 90 before the interstate highway system existed. The design is an uncommon arched cantilever truss, and if you look closely at the railings, you'll find decorative ironwork, crossed guns, cast into the steel. The bridge is 6,617 feet long, just over a mile and a quarter, carrying an estimated 55,000 vehicles a day across the Calcasieu River between Lake Charles and West Lake. Below it, an older railroad swing bridge from 1907 still spans the same river. 2 generations of infrastructure layered on top of each other. The National Bridge Inventory rates it structurally deficient, with a sufficiency score of 6.6 out of 100. The new design will honour the original, lighting shaped like the old trusses and pylons bearing sculptures of crossed pistols, carrying the character of the 1952 structure into the next century. For the people of southwest Louisiana, it's more than a crossing. It's the bridge that the region outgrew, and the one being built to carry it forward. Most state capitals have a dome. Louisiana built a skyscraper. The Louisiana State Capitol rises 450 feet and 34 stories, the tallest state capitol in the United States, taller than the US Capitol in Washington. Construction was completed in just 14 months at a cost of $5 million in the depths of the Great Depression. It was dedicated on May 16, 1932. The steel frame is clad in Alabama limestone on the outside and Italian marble inside. Art Deco reliefs and Louisiana state symbols are carved into every surface. The building sits on 27 acres of formerly landscaped grounds, axial garden paths, native trees, a reflecting pool, visible from the tower's observation deck on the 27th floor. Behind the Capitol, the Mississippi River runs wide and brown, industrial refineries smoking on the opposite bank. It was designated a National Historic Landmark in 1982. At night, the tower is lit and visible for miles, a 34-story monument to one man's ambition, still standing over the flat Louisiana landscape. St. Louis Cathedral is the oldest Roman Catholic cathedral in continuous operation in the United States, in operation since 1727. The first permanent church, built in 1727, was burned in the fire of 1788. With the generous support of Don Andres Almonaster Itiroxus, a much larger church was built in its place, opening on Christmas Eve, 1794. In the 1840s, plans emerged to renovate it again. The central tower collapsed during construction in 1850, bringing part of the roof down with it. The present structure dates from that rebuilding. The design, a blend of Greek Revival, Gothic and Renaissance motifs, was the work of French-born architect J.N.B. de Pouilly. Three white spires rise above Jackson Square. The central bell is named Victoire, cast to honour Andrew Jackson's victory at the Battle of New Orleans in 1815. It stands between the historic buildings of the Cabildo and the Presbytère, both now part of the Louisiana State Museum. The three buildings together form the oldest civic ensemble in America. Pope Paul VI designated it a minor basilica in 1964. Pope John Paul II visited in September 1987. Daily Mass is still offered here. Weddings, funerals, festivals, the square outside fills up, empties out, and fills again. For 300 years, a church has stood on this ground, facing the river. Everything around it has changed. The cathedral stays. Audubon Park sits on approximately 350 acres in uptown New Orleans, bordered by St. Charles Avenue on one side and the Mississippi River on the other. Before it was a park, this land belonged to two sugar plantations. The plantation buildings were destroyed. What remained were the live oak trees. The city acquired the land in 1871. It was largely a wilderness. Then in 1884, it was chosen as the site for the World's Industrial and Cotton Centennial Exposition. In 1886, the park was renamed Audubon Park in honor of naturalist John James Audubon, who had lived in New Orleans since 1821 and painted the birds of the American South. In 1898, the city hired John Charles Olmsted of the Olmsted Brothers firm to redesign it, creating lagoons and a watercourse to transform what had been swampy flatland into a flowing landscape. Those lagoons are still here. So are the oaks. Some of them were growing before the United States existed. Audubon Zoo occupies 58 acres within the park and is home to more than 2,000 animals. Animal exhibits have been on this site since the 1884 World's Fair. The park has a 1.8-mile jogging path, a golf course, tennis courts, and a rookery island that is one of the best birding spots in Greater New Orleans. Six miles from the French Quarter, Audubon Park is where the city comes to slow down. The same ground that once produced sugar, then spectacle, now offering something simpler: shade, open water, and room to breathe. Two parallel bridges, one lake. 23.83 miles of concrete and steel, the longest continuous bridge over water on Earth, according to Guinness World Records. The Lake Pontchartrain Causeway connects Metairie on the south shore near New Orleans to Mandeville on the north, carrying 4 lanes of traffic across a lake that is nearly 24 miles wide at this point. It sits just 15 feet above the surface of the water. 9,500 concrete pilings hold it up. The structure is so simple and repetitive, it could be mass-produced, and it was, with components prefabricated on shore and floated into position by barge. The southbound bridge carries 2,246 spans. The northbound carries 1,506. Seven emergency crossovers connect them in case of incidents. In the middle stretch, drivers lose sight of land for a full 8 miles. Nothing in any direction but water, sky, and the road ahead vanishing into the horizon. There are 6 safety bays on each span. Segmented shoulders where drivers can pull over in an emergency, spaced at regular intervals from the 2-mile mark to the 22-mile mark. A bascule drawbridge interrupts the spans at mile 8, manned around the clock for marine traffic. It stays closed during peak commute hours to keep traffic flowing. Around 43,000 round trips cross the causeway every day. It is a working commuter bridge, not a tourist attraction. Families, workers, freight, all of them crossing a lake in both directions every day. The opening of the causeway reduced drive time from the North Shore into New Orleans by up to 50 minutes, pulling communities like Mandeville, Covington, and Abita Springs into the New Orleans metropolitan orbit. The bridge is long enough that the curvature of the earth is visible from the roadway. On a clear day, the far shore doesn't disappear behind the horizon. It curves away beneath it. One of the few surviving French Creole plantation houses in the region, and the oldest documented structure in Baton Rouge. Built around 1791 as a small settler's cottage, it was expanded in the early 1800s into the elegant seat of a major landowner, once the centre of a 900-acre operation growing indigo, cotton, tobacco, and sugarcane. Today's museum complex includes the main house and its open hearth kitchen, an 1830s-era slave quarter, an overseer's house, a pigeonnier, and a carriage house. A complete picture of plantation life, not just the big house. The house is constructed of cypress beams and bucelage, a traditional mix of mud and Spanish moss, with original cypress flooring still intact after more than 200 years. The live oaks standing along the approach were already old when the house was young. They outlasted every owner, and now shade a site that belongs to the public, preserved so the full story of this land can finally be told. The Horace Wilkinson Bridge carries interstate 10 across the Mississippi River at Baton Rouge and holds the distinction of being the highest bridge anywhere on the river. Its overall length is 14,150 feet. The steel truss superstructure alone stretches 4,550 feet, with a main span of 1,235 feet, clearing the navigation channel. Six lanes of traffic run across an 80-foot wide deck, sitting 175 feet above the water. The navigation channel below is 500 feet wide enough for the ocean-going vessels that make Baton Rouge one of the busiest ports in the country. Baton Rouge is the northernmost point on the Mississippi where deep-water, ocean-going ships can operate. This bridge is built to match that scale. The design is a cantilever Warren through truss, a structure that extends outward from anchor points on each bank, balancing loads without intermediate supports that would block river traffic. When completed in 1968, it was the third largest cantilever span in the United States. It was engineered by Modjeski and Masters and built by the American Bridge Company of New York, opening to traffic on April 10, 1968. After crossing the superstructure, I-10 continues as an elevated viaduct all the way to the Dalrymple Drive exit near Louisiana State University. The bridge doesn't just cross a river, it carries the interstate through the heart of the city. Around 126,000 vehicles cross it every day as of 2022, making it one of the most heavily trafficked river crossings in the American South. Cargo ships pass beneath it. Tugboats push barge trains under its truss. What you're looking at is not just a bridge, it's the point where land traffic and river commerce cross paths on one of the world's great waterways. Grand Isle is the only inhabited barrier island in Louisiana. 8 miles long, barely a mile wide, sitting at the mouth of Barataria Bay where it meets the Gulf of Mexico. At its center lies one of the last remaining live oak cheniere forests on the Gulf Coast, a natural ridge that has sheltered over 2 centuries of human life on the island. The permanent population is around 1,500. In summer, that number climbs past 20,000. Anglers, campers and families filling every camp and marina on the island. Grand Isle State Park on the island's eastern end is the only state-owned beach on the Louisiana Gulf Coast and one of the few places in the state where people surf. Across the pass, the ruins of Fort Livingston stand on Grande Terre Island, a 19th century fortification now overtaken by marsh grass, accessible only by boat, a Louisiana state commemorative area crumbling quietly into the Gulf. "95% of all Gulf marine life spends at least part of its existence in Louisiana's coastal wetlands. Grand Isle is both the edge and the gateway of that ecosystem. The island has been hit by major hurricanes repeatedly: Betsy, Katrina, Ida. Each time the residents come back. 1,000 people on a strip of sand a few feet above sea level choosing to stay. From above, it looks like a massive silver disc pressed into the heart of the city, a light bronze dome rising above the New Orleans skyline, impossible to mistake for anything else. Caesar's Superdome opened in 1975, designed by Louisiana architects Curtis and Davis with the ambition to build something the world had never seen. It is the largest fixed dome structure on Earth, 680 feet in diameter, 273 feet tall, with a roof covering 9.7 acres. That makes it the largest fully enclosed column-free steel structure in the world. On the outside, nearly 400,000 square feet of anodized aluminum panels wrap the entire building in a light bronze finish. Each panel measuring 1 foot by 25 feet, weighing about 27.5 pounds, and specifically engineered for this project. The finish is fade-proof, which is why the exterior still holds that same distinctive sheen decades later. The total building footprint reaches 2 million square feet, with a seating capacity of over 73,000 for football, expandable to 83,000 for larger events. No stadium in America has hosted more Super Bowls. 7 and still counting. In 2005, the building was severely damaged by the storm and had to close for several months afterward. After a complete renovation, the building reopened in time for the Saints' 2006 season opener on September 25th. The structure is now listed on the National Register of Historic Places. Between 2019 and 2024, a comprehensive renovation reclaimed 100,000 square feet of public space inside, without touching the iconic exterior. In 2021, Caesars Entertainment acquired the naming rights for 20 years, giving the dome its current name. Music also has been a big part of the Superdome's history. Over the years, it has played host to such names as Merle Haggard, Johnny Cash, Aretha Franklin, the Charlie Daniels Band, the Allman Brothers, Waylon Jennings, the OJs, and many others. Regardless of the event, the Caesars Superdome is worth a visit to marvel at its sheer size and scope. Walk far enough from downtown New Orleans and the city gives way to something unexpected. 1,300 acres of ancient oak trees, still lagoons and open meadows that feel nothing like a city at all. City Park is roughly 50% larger than Central Park in New York, yet it carries none of that famous pressure to impress. What it has, instead, is time, and you can feel it the moment you step under the canopy. This park holds the largest collection of mature live oaks in the world, with some trees that have stood here for over 800 years. Their branches sweep low and wide, heavy with Spanish moss, casting long pools of shade across paths where people jog, bike, and simply sit without any particular destination in mind. More than 11 miles of lagoons wind through the grounds, their surfaces broken by lily pads, wading birds, and the occasional turtle pulling itself onto a log in the sun. egrets and herons move through these waterways at their own pace. 280 bird species have been documented here, making City Park the best birding spot in New Orleans. From the air, the scale becomes clear. Golf fairways curve around water, open meadows roll into dense forest, and paths disappear beneath unbroken green. The New Orleans Museum of Art anchors the cultural side of the park, its neoclassical facade reflected in the lagoon beside it. Nearby, the Peristyle, a colonnaded pavilion built in 1907, sits at the water's edge with the quiet authority of something designed to last. The Botanical Garden holds over 2,000 varieties of plants, and the Katuri Forest packs 8 distinct ecosystems into just 30 acres of dense subtropical growth. Bridges cross bayous barely wide enough to name, and the water beneath them moves so slowly it is almost impossible to tell which direction it flows. Established as a public park in 1854, City Park ranks today as the 20th most visited urban park in the entire United States. It is visited millions of times each year, mostly by the people who live here and have never needed a reason to come. A park with trees this old and space this generous earns a different kind of quiet. And City Park has had 800 years to get it right. Metairie spreads out across 23 square miles of flat suburban landscape, its drainage canals cutting straight lines through residential streets, its lakefront levees holding back the brown water of Lake Pontchartrain. With a population of 143,507 as of 2020, technically not a city, with no mayor of its own, but large enough, busy enough, and self-sufficient enough that it rarely needs the title. From here, the Lake Pontchartrain Causeway stretches northward across the water. Nearly 24 miles of parallel bridge spans connecting this quiet suburb to the North Shore. From the air, it looks like something drawn with a compass. A curved arc of brick walls, a star-shaped moat, and a compact citadel at the center, all of it sitting directly in the water at the edge of the Rigolets Pass. The design features an arc of gun casemates oriented toward the Rigolets waterway for seaward defense, supplemented by a moat and 3-pointed bastions enabling flanking fire. A layout built not just to hold, but to make any approach by water feel like a trap. The citadel at the center could garrison up to 400 men, yet for all its firepower, not a single cannon was ever fired in battle from Fort Pike. It was listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1972, but the walls were already aging long before that. And then the 2005 Katrina storm surge exacerbated the decay, flooding the entire structure and accelerating what time had already started. Today, the fort is closed to the public, its brick slowly surrendering to the marsh, its casemates open to the sky, a ruin that still reads from above, exactly like what it was built to be. Built in 1837 on a narrow spit of marsh at the north shore of Lake Pontchartrain, the Tchefuncte River Light Station is a 36-foot brick tower standing alone at the water's edge. The current tower was rebuilt in 1868 on the same original foundation, using some of the same brick. A quiet detail that makes this small lighthouse feel less like a ruin and more like something that simply refused to stop working. Across the river from the French Quarter, on the west bank of the Mississippi, sits New Orleans' second oldest neighborhood. A ferry connects Algiers Point to downtown, one of the nation's oldest ferry lines still in operation. The ride takes only a few minutes, but the atmosphere on the other side feels nothing like the city you just left. From the levee, the entire New Orleans skyline stretches across the water. The old cathedral, the bridges, the towers of the central business district. Algiers was part of the original land grant given to New Orleans founder Jean-Baptiste Le Moyne de Bienville back in 1719. Creole cottages and double shotguns painted every colour of the rainbow line the quiet residential streets of the point. Most were built in the years immediately after a catastrophic 1895 fire destroyed hundreds of structures across the neighbourhood. Jazz musicians of the 1920s called Algiers the Brooklyn of the South, close to the city, separated by water, and moving at its own pace. More than a century later, that description still fits. With such vibrant industry, it's not surprising that Algiers also had 36 bars and several dance halls by 1911. Once crowded by industrial warehouses, Algiers Point today is predominantly residential, and the levee is a pleasant place to walk or bike, with a paved path that connects the town to neighbouring Gretna. The Atchafalaya Basin is the largest swampy wetland in the United States, about 20 miles wide and 150 miles long, a vast expanse of cypress forests, flooded backwaters. Bald cypress trees here can exceed 1,000 years of age. their buttressed trunks rising from dark tannin-stained water, draped in Spanish moss. It supports over 270 bird species and is home to alligators, Louisiana black bears, and more than 100 species of fish. A wilderness that feels ancient because most of it is. At nearly 150 acres, Metairie Cemetery is the largest cemetery in New Orleans, and one of the most architecturally striking burial grounds in the entire United States. Tombs here are more spaciously laid out than in other New Orleans cemeteries and constitute some of the most spectacular funerary architecture in the country. The styles range widely: Egyptian Revival, Byzantine, Victorian Gothic, Greek Revival, Islamic, and Baroque, all standing side by side across the open lawn. Metairie holds the largest collection of marble tombs and funeral statuary in historic New Orleans, with over 7,000 tombs spread across the grounds. One of the most imposing is the Moriarty tomb, its marble monument standing 60 feet tall. The cemetery's roughly 120,000 residents include 9 governors, 12 New Orleans mayors, and 6 state Supreme Court justices. Unlike many New Orleans cemeteries, Metairie includes both above-ground vaults and in-ground burials, with areas of open lawns scattered with trees. It is home to over 1,000 trees, and locals regularly use it as a park, jogging, walking dogs, and pushing strollers past the mausoleums. The cemetery was entered into the National Register of Historic Places in 1991. Quiet, grand, and impossible to rush through, Metairie Cemetery rewards anyone willing to slow down and look. Greenwood Cemetery is one of the largest cemeteries in New Orleans, its white marble tombs stretching in long, orderly rows as far as the eye can see. Wide, paved, rectilinear walkways divide the grounds into dozens of large blocks, with tombs compactly arranged, back to back, in long strips, and uniform swaths of lawn running between them. From above, the grid reads almost like a city. Streets, blocks, and buildings all perfectly still. Greenwood was the first above-ground cemetery in New Orleans to be built without perimeter walls, giving it an open park-like quality that sets it apart from others in the city. There are about 20,500 lots across the grounds, with an average of 1,000 interments each year. Several imposing memorials line the entrance perimeter, giving the cemetery a grand first impression. The most iconic is the Elk's Tomb, a grassy mound topped with a majestic bronze elk. Its granite entrance fashioned in the Greek Doric style with a clock frozen at 11 o'clock. The cemetery also holds striking examples of mid-19th century cast iron tombs, a style that came into vogue at the time. In 1982, a grand mausoleum with 14,000 planned burial spaces was added in the northeastern sector. Greenwood sits adjacent to Metairie Cemetery, Cypress Grove, Oddfellows Rest, and St. Patrick's Cemetery, together forming one of the most concentrated clusters of historic cemeteries in the United States. The Mississippi River is the second longest river in the United States, stretching 2,340 miles from its source at Lake Itasca in northern Minnesota down to the Gulf of Mexico. Along the way, it borders or passes through 10 states, from Minnesota south through Wisconsin, Iowa, Illinois, Missouri, Kentucky, Tennessee, Arkansas, Mississippi, and Louisiana. Its drainage basin covers about 1.2 million square miles, roughly 40% of the continental United States, pulling water from the Rockies all the way to the Appalachians. By the time it reaches New Orleans, the river has already gathered water from half a continent. Here it runs about half a mile wide, its surface the color of dark mud, slow and deliberate under the weight of everything it carries. The deepest section of the entire river lies between Governor Nichols Wharf and Algiers Point in New Orleans, where it reaches 200 feet deep. The average flow where it empties into the Gulf is 600,000 cubic feet, roughly 4.5 million gallons per second. From the riverfront, you can watch cargo ships, barges, and paddle wheelers move past in both directions, a constant reminder of how much work this river still does. More than 6,000 ocean-going vessels pass through New Orleans annually, and 60% of all grain exported from the United States is shipped through the Port of New Orleans and the Port of South Louisiana. The river system accounts for 92% of the nation's agricultural exports and 78% of the world's exports in feed grains and soybeans. At least 260 species of fish live throughout the Mississippi, and 60% of all North American birds use the river basin as their migratory flyway. Water that leaves Lake Itasca takes about 3 months to reach the Gulf of Mexico, traveling the length of a continent before quietly disappearing into the sea at the edge of Louisiana. Louisiana is a place that lingers in the senses long after the journey ends, filled with music, flavour and soul. The rhythm of jazz drifting through old streets and the scent of Cajun spices create an atmosphere unlike anywhere else in America. From mysterious bayous to vibrant festivals, every experience feels alive with culture and history. There's a warmth here that comes not only from the climate, but from the people and their deep-rooted traditions. Leaving Louisiana feels like stepping away from a story still playing somewhere in the distance, inviting you to return someday.